That was Carin Gorrell from Yoga Journal. She's the editor-in-chief, and it's a tremendously popular magazine in the world of yoga. And Phil, I mean, I had no idea. I knew there were a lot of yoga practitioners, but since 2012, it's in the United States, it's gone from 20 million practitioners, however that's defined, to 36 million. It's almost doubled. I mean, can it continue growing, or will it plateau at some point?
Well, I, the reason I asked her how they define practitioner, and I'm still not clear on that, is, you know, does it mean people who go to a yoga class once or twice a year? Does it mean, people who learned a few asanas and, do them to stretch before they jog? Or is it people who have a serious yoga practice as a part of their spiritual path? It's very hard to know what is meant by that. Maybe we can probe a little further and find
Yeah, I
out.
think in a survey somewhere it defines it by some practices at least 2, 3 hours a week, something like that. So it's somebody that's actually doing it, not like they took a class and never did it again. And
Yeah,
I'm not surprised, although a lot of people take classes. What I don't know is how many people practice it on their own at home, but I'm sure it's quite a
right.
few. And even if that number is exaggerated, it's still a heck of a lot of
A
people.
lot of people.
And
And
yeah.
and the amount of money spent on yoga accessories is extraordinary, and
Right,
that's not something one can fake.
right.
Although there's a lot of people who might buy yoga pants, and stuff, and just use it for lounge outfits. There was a New Yorker cartoon recently about something about how people could have a yoga mat without ever using it.
Yeah, I have a
just,
couple of those.
just to carry around the
Yeah,
streets of New York.
yeah. If people want to have a sense of how far yoga has come in the culture, if you Google Elvis Presley yoga scene in movie, there's a
Yeah,
scene where he sings a song about yoga. It's probably from and yoga back at that time was like from another planet. But now it's why
yeah.
nobody's going to be looked at in an odd way if they say they practice yoga or even
No,
meditation anymore. So that's a that's
no. I
that's a
mean,
huge
I
change.
remember sitting and meditating, in a church pew or a empty church or a park bench or something, and
Hmm.
people looking at me like I was, crazy and wondering if I was, needed help. But now you see people sitting with their eyes closed or doing asanas on the beach or a public park, and it's just part of the landscape. But you know, I would love to see a survey that goes a little deeper into this notion of who's doing what and who's practicing what,
Right.
and like suppose if those 30 whatever million people are taking yoga classes, how many of them have a meditation practice?
Right.
How many are only doing asanas?
Right.
How many are doing, fitness yoga or power yoga as opposed to more meditative practices? I mean, this would be, a kind of interesting breakdown of that, but I don't know if anybody is doing
Right.
such a
Yeah, I
survey.
mean, the good news is a lot more people are practicing it. Maybe the bad news, I don't know how you want to look at it, is it's become an
Yeah,
industry. And right here in the survey, it says practitioners spending on yoga classes, clothing, equipment, and accessories rose to $16 billion in the U.S., up from
yeah.
10 billion over the past 4 years. So once it becomes an industry like that, then there are other forces other than those of spiritual development that are driving the industry and affect things. That being said, it's still good, and there may be better yoga classes than others,
Sure.
Carin, she represents a magazine that probably gets a lot of good information to people that helps people that need help, that helps people that are stressed out or whatever. But at the same time, and you brought this up, they sort of define what yoga is and who practices it. And if you look at the magazine, and she said it'll be changing and be more diverse, but you see these like look like models in these expensive yoga outfits doing all sorts of poses that the average person could never do, and so it becomes almost like a glamour magazine. rather than something that's just for the masses, and then people
Right, but
aspire to look like that. Yeah.
and that's one could be cynical and say that Yoga Journal is part of the problem of yoga being reduced
Hmm.
to asanas and fitness, and that it appeals to people who aspire to look better and to be glamorous and so forth. On the other hand, as she said, and other people have said on our program, and as you said today, people get into something like asana practice or even meditation practice for whatever reasons
Right.
are most immediate in their areas of concern.
Right.
They have a physical ailment, they're worn out, they're stressed, they have anxiety, they're depressed, and if they stick to the practices and they see they work, those are often the doorways in,
Right.
and then they find out there's something better. I mean, you and I came from the era when meditation was the principal focal point of yogic practice, and asanas was secondary. But people came to TM at the height of TM's fame for what we would think of as superficial reasons also.
Right. Right.
You
I
know,
mean, if somebody comes to me, Phil, and they say, "I'm going to practice yoga because I really want to get in shape and I want to look better for," I'm totally fine with that. I mean, go ahead.
sure,
My guess is they're going to get a lot more. It was like when we taught TM. It was people came, I want to start meditation because I want to get rid of these headaches, or it
right.
wasn't necessarily for anything spiritual. But let them do it, and then their perception of it changes, and their desires change. And I've seen that. So I think anybody should be encouraged. By the way,
Yeah.
one of
But
the things.
let me add
Yeah.
something, Dennis. I think the responsibility of people in the yoga world, whether it's Yoga Journal or the yoga teachers or the owners of yoga studios and the people training yoga teachers, is to give all those people what they need and make it accessible to people at every level of interest, but let them know. I mean, I think that's a critical element, is to
Hmm.
not lose sight of all that yoga really is and can be.
Right, right. And I think that's important. And I think some of the people I know teaching yoga, especially people that come from the tradition of Iyengar, they are very um, strongly feeling that their particular tradition or system is best, and that many of the systems are watered down or not as good. And you get into that with meditation and all as
Well,
well.
sure.
And I think ultimately, if you're out there listening, thinking, I want to take yoga, what yoga class should I take? Ask friends that have been doing it. But I think the main thing is you take a class that you feel comfortable with. When we had Eddie Stern on, who's a very
Right.
well-known yoga teacher in New York, that was the point he made. He said his uncle took him to a yoga class, and his uncle loved it, but Eddie said he hated it. And then he
Right.
went on and found yoga that he liked, and he's become one of the most successful, and I think one of the better teachers in the
Yeah.
United States.
As long as the teachers are grounded in the fullness
Right,
of what yoga is and honor the tradition that yoga comes from, that is my main concern.
right,
Because if they are, then they will let people know what the fullness of yoga is, and they'll gravitate toward it or not according to where they're at in life.
right.
You just don't want it to be diluted and distorted to the degree where people see it only as a fitness practice.
Right, and
And
also, go ahead.
yeah, no, you go ahead.
I'm just going to emphasize a point that I've heard you make before, and that is, so our listeners understand that yoga, the word yoga, doesn't necessarily refer to yoga asanas or hatha yoga. Yoga means wholeness, fullness that comes from a spiritually developed life. And yoga asanas, which is most people when they hear yoga, what they're thinking of is the hatha yoga, the positions. That's one part of it. But there's bhakti yoga. There's which is devotional. There's meditation. There's hatha yoga. There's approaching it from many, many angles. But the goal ultimately being that full, well-rounded, well-balanced, fully balanced development.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. So
Well,
another one, and
onward and upward.
just one last statistic from the survey: 34% of Americans, or 80 million people, 8 million people, say they are likely to try yoga for the first time in the next 12 months. So, wow,
Wait, did you say 8 million or 80 million?
80 million.
80
This
million.
is right out of the Yoga Journal
That's
survey.
almost wow, that's a lot of people.
Many
Well, let's see how
folks.
many actually do.
Yeah, we'll see. All right, until next time. Over
Okay.
and out.